Hello, everyone, and welcome to part two of this three-part series. And I guarantee you, if you don't know what I'm talking about, that's because you've missed part one. Go back and check it out, as we are going to start where we left off. The CROC podcast starts right now.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're in the University of the West Indies. You're distinguishing yourself intellectually and academically. Your faith, I'm assured, continues to grow logarithmically, and now you have an opportunity to study here at a bigger on a bigger stage. Tell us a little bit about that transition.
Interesting. The move of God again. I think I'm just going to be redundant here every single time you ask that question, right? So there was a professor, Dr. Keith Pascoe, at the University of the West Indies. He was my organic chemistry professor. And I had graduated at the time. I was still in Jamaica. And he contacted me and offered me this opportunity to study abroad. He said, well, there is a PhD program at Georgia State University, and I think you'd be great. I think you should just take the GMAT and apply. I have no idea why he chose me. I mean, he could have chosen so many other students, but he contacted me and encouraged me to apply. My brothers agreed, and I took the GMAT. Of course, I entered into the program, the PhD program at Georgia State University, and I was provided with several, as you probably know, in the PhD program, you are given a milieu of projects, so to speak, and you can choose the project of interest. And so I chose to study anthraquinones, which, as you know, are anti-cancer agents. Not knowing my future, obviously, I just was drawn to that project, right? And so I don't want to go into all the details and bore you, but basically I synthesized the anti-cancer agents by adding different side chains to the anthraquinones so that they would dictate the DNA binding rate, right? And so a fast on rate and a slow off rate would be more effective, so to speak. Okay, so that's the gist of it. The interesting thing is that the first day I entered the program, I needed to register, and I was assigned to a student named Kisha, but she was not available. And so my husband was the second choice. And of course, that's the day I met my husband, the very first day. We were friends, of course, before we took the next step, but we've been married now for over 25 years. So that's one that was an interesting tidbit that I didn't even know that I was entering the United States and this particular program to meet my husband, but he was there waiting for me 2 years before, which is really interesting.
That's another spiritual door that opened for you.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And after I graduated, well, before I graduated from the PhD program, I somehow there was something inside me that was reignited. I became interested in medicine again, and this is the work of God. Many times we don't understand why we feel compelled, why there is this urge, there is this new fire, so to speak, to pursue something that was not really in our thought maybe a year before or 10 years before, but it is his timing. I remember Angel mentioning this, before we started recording. I mean, we had a very brief conversation, and he said something that was quite profound, which is, the timing of God. There's something about God's timing that's always going to be perfect. We sometimes think it is a delay, but there is no delay in him. He knows the beginning from the end, and he inserts his event in time from eternity, right? And so the timing of that jolt within me was scheduled. And so I became quite interested in entering the medical field. Now, I applied obviously, and I had some options, and I was attracted to Cornell because it was right across the street from, Sloan Kettering. And I knew that I was interested in oncology because, of course, of my PhD research. The thing is, I did not know I would enter radiation oncology because I thought, well, synthesizing anti-cancer agents, that meant that I would be a medical oncologist. And so fast forward to the end of, well, actually, I shadowed a physician, Dr. Carol Portlock, throughout my first year. She did not have a summer research project. Just so happens that she didn't. And so she introduced me to Aki Yahalam, who's a radiation oncologist. And I became fascinated with radiation oncology. And so that was another a milestone, I would say, just another ordered step, so to speak, that I did not anticipate. I did not know that was him really guiding me, but it certainly was. And of course, so I was basically a glorified resident my entire Cornell tenure. And, as you know, I entered residency at Sloan Kettering, and I was given several opportunities to work on several research projects. Now, during that time, when I was faced with patient care, there was something about patient care that was always different for me. I always had the sense that there was more. There has to be more than this. It cannot be just treating the cancer. But as you very well know, Dr. E, the complexity of cancer alone and the treatment algorithms, it can be such that you can become so immersed, right, that you may have blinders on. But there's something that was always poking and tugging. There's more. The patient needs more. It was a demand that was pulling on me, and that's because of again, his will. His will always will always be accomplished. We say we have free will, but if there's a calling and a purpose, it really isn't. But that may be controversial for most. It's not for me. So there was that tugging, of wanting to give more, wanting to explore more than just the treatment, wanting to insert, spirituality, or just discuss the sense of the hope, right? Identity, spirituality, how his power is greater than anything that they could ever face, and center them in that anchor, right? That anchor that we know that we all need to live on this earth, right? To allow them to experience that as well. So that was that unction that was being awakened within me as I progressed through residency.
Sophia, that's such a beautiful segue, because what I want our survivor thrivers to know, and some of our colleagues that listen to this podcast, in case they don't know, An education and a residency at Memorial
Mhm.
Sloan Kettering is a very prestigious, opportunity. And many, many people that go through that residency, as difficult as it is, it's almost like going to flight school and becoming a pilot for a major airline. You could pretty much write your ticket and you could have a very, very soft and cushy life, either in
Mhm.
academic medicine or in private practice.
Mhm.
So what I want our listeners to understand is that this is the juncture to going to question number two, is
Mhm.
that it seems like that was the moment that you distilled that you knew, which was already
Mhm.
predestined from your
Yeah.
mother's prediction and her
Yeah.
revelation,
Yeah.
that you were not going to just go and live your life as a cushy, private practitioner or
Yeah.
academic radiation
Yeah.
oncologist, but you were
Mhm.
instead going to change the way
Mhm.
that a physician should interface with their patient, and
Yeah.
even more importantly, how that was, I want to say, the initiation of you becoming, as I said before, a cancer ambassador, an
Mhm.
internationally renowned cancer ambassador. So, if
Mhm.
I'm correct,
Mhm.
does that seem like the timing around that
Yes.
point?
Yes. Yes. And the interesting thing is that I was at there were a lot of internal battles because of what was really expected at such an institution. And what was interesting, Dr. E, is that my mentor, Dr. Yahalam, he realized, I think he saw that there was certainly um, a difference in how I wanted to relate with my patients, and I engaged in research, uh, with several attendings as well. But he understood. I think he saw that there was something else that I tapped into that wasn't necessarily groomed there. And it's interesting because I am extremely grateful for all the attendings, everyone that I rotated with at Sloan. And as you said, the education is remarkable. And really, you're basically just, it's you're basically thrown in this huge ocean and told to swim. And the reason I say that is because of the vast array of patients, and just the patients flying from everywhere, all over the world. So we saw so many different, types of cancers that you wouldn't see just in another institution. So it was a really great experience. But what I must say is that at the end of my residency, we have this exit interview. And Dr. Yahalam, my mentor, I was waiting to see him, and he's really very busy. And I thought we were going to have this, 1 hour conversation. And he said to me, he said, I just have one advice for you. He said, never change, never change. And I said, what does I mean? I'm thinking he's, I'm ready to write notes. So what do I do? What is your advice for me? I'm, heading out to academia. And he said, just be exactly who you are, because that is going to be what the field needs and what the patients need. Don't never change. I expected more, but I realized that that was actually the greatest advice and the greatest compliment he could have ever bestowed, right? And the entire time, and there were some difficulties, trust me, but the interesting thing is the entire time he was supporting me, and he was observing. He was observing, and I didn't know that he had that perspective until the end. I didn't know.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
So now, as you're getting out, and now you enter another transition,
Yes.
and that's the transition of how you became the cancer ambassador and
Yes. Yes.
international proponent of this different type of approach to the patient.
Right.
Can you give
Exactly.
us a little insight to that?
So, I think I think this all commenced at Sloan. I just didn't really have the time to process it the way that I did as my own, attending, not being a resident anymore. But what I noticed, very, very, very keenly observed, uh, in my patients was that, and just in my practice every day, clinical care, was that there was something that was not being addressed, that I was tapping into with my patients, but not necessarily formally. But I was being driven basically every encounter to go deeper than just the treatment recommendations and discussing toxicity, but go deeper into how the patient is actually coping, how they're feeling, which is why I developed his lamp. So what I call the psychological tumors, the silent tumors that are usually growing with the physical tumor that we can see, which is the latter is what we treat, but the psychological tumor remains unaddressed. Right. And it's the spirituality, it's the priming of all the experiences I mentioned, right? That allowed me to recognize that I needed to go deeper. I needed to go deeper into that well to then excavate everything, unveil what they're going through so that when it's exposed, it can be addressed accordingly, right? So the measure of hope that needs to be transferred to anyone going through any adversity, right? It needs to be done in such a way that it it is it is real to that patient. Every patient is different. So whenever a patient presents to me or to you, what we recognize is that they're presenting not just with their cancer, but they're presenting with this mindset of, okay, this is the big C, and therefore I'm facing my mortality, right? Regardless of the stage, this is something that I always say, picture a year before. They did not picture a day before they were told that they needed a biopsy, that a scan showed a mass that clearly was not supposed to be there, or they had a cough and they presented thinking it was a pneumonia, and they were treated for antibiotics with antibiotics for 2 weeks. It did not respond, and they're still thinking, well, this is probably still something benign, and I can go on with my life. They're making 5-10 year plans, as we all do, and then they receive the shocking news, and just step into that moment. Just step into that moment, okay? And realizing that their entire life has just taken a completely different turn that they did not anticipate, right? So stepping in that moment and knowing that this is what they're going through. And then we are now discussing all of these complex treatments, which we have to, we must. That's why we're there. We're experts, we're trained to treat patients. But what we cannot ignore is that rumination. It is that nagging that will not ever go away even after they're treated. This has to be addressed, right? Because this when they leave our clinic, Dr. E, that goes with them. Those thoughts, those menacing thoughts of, where do I go from here? What does this mean? What does this mean for my family? What does this mean for my life how long will I be on this earth? Well, they're now going back 10 years, trying to think of what they could have done, what they're facing now. It's just all overwhelming, and that is an understatement. So what I realized in practice is that this just cannot be ignored, because if it is ignored, then we're not really treating the whole patient. And I know we can refer patients to, therapy, and we can do all these things. But the thing is, what patient has time after we're telling them they're going to experience all these toxicities? For us, we're instructing our patients they need to be here Monday through Friday every day, right? For 5 weeks, sometimes 9 weeks, right? And some of our patients are undergoing concurrent chemotherapy as well. How many appointments could they possibly need? And I'm not against therapy at all. I'm just stating that as the physician, I think we have to take hold. What I've realized is we have to take hold of what our patients are presenting with right there and then, because they're going through it every single day, and it needs to be addressed in a tangible way so that they themselves can then be more hopeful about how this all turns out, in terms of even when they leave, how do they manage, how do they cope with the ruminating thoughts that are going through their minds. And as the physician, because they respect us, because we are the ones taking care of their cancer, I cannot see anyone else that is more capable of reaching the very depth of their souls, and giving them some level of hope.
That is so beautifully said. And I was just thinking to myself, I've spent a 35-year career trying to do exactly that, but I never really was able to articulate it as beautifully as you just did. And I would like to follow that up with a question. Did you immediately know that you were going to take that aspect of treating the cancer, which is the tumor, and the other associated quote unquote cancers that come with the diagnosis of cancer, and then integrate your faith and your spirituality as a tool, as an assist to help achieve that?
That's a great question. Thank you. So it's a great question because it's all intertwined. I think I keep mentioning this, but I think that first and foremost, a calling cannot be denied. A calling guides you. A calling deposits thoughts within you that are not your own, that you know you must act upon. A calling is an umbrella purpose, with the spokes of the umbrella being the assignment, right? So you have several assignments, right? When you step into any assignment, it is obviously dictated by a calling. And so there are certain divine directions that one must be aware of, because it is in that awareness that you can then channel what is being spoken to you in the spirit, which is then transferred to the soul, which then you can express vocally. Okay. Now, once you are in that dimension, you can couple then all the lessons that you have learned from, all your years of education, along with your natural proclivity to offer empathy. Do you see what I'm saying? And so,
Yeah.
so they're all intertwined, right? And so the direction gave instruction on how to collate the lessons from the experiences that I've learned going through my adversities, the proclivity, the tendency to, and the empathy that you're charged with, that's just built in, right? It's inherent, it's somewhat inherent and somewhat nature versus nurture, right? From experience, as I always say, you cannot give a grace that you have not received. And so having those experiences of adversity, you can align yourself with your patient's adversity, because you don't know exactly if you have not been diagnosed, then you don't know exactly, but you can still go with them in that well. And then the spirituality of it all is really that divine direction. And so collating all of those elements, I would say that is how I was guided to then first establish his lamp, but guided into on this path where I became this physician who practiced in no other way but the referenced.
Oh, it is so apparent, Sophia, and so well taken by me and Angel and all of us.
Please do not shoot the messenger, folks. This is where we pause part 2 and let you know that next week will be the conclusion of this 3-part series. But we're not going to let you go without a little sneak peek of what's coming up next week. Check it out.
And so appreciated. That'll segue me into another question, and that's how you utilize those gifts to center you as a healer, sustain you as a healer.
So you don't want to miss next week's final conclusion of this 3-part series. I will ask all of you once again, please like, share, subscribe us, and give us feedback. We are looking forward to hearing from you. From all of us here at the CROC Podcast, see you next week for the conclusion of this 3-part series.